I'm Karen Colligan, and welcome to the Let's Talk Leadership podcast. So why do I care about leadership? As the founder of PeopleThink, and in my tenure as a leader, as a consultant, and as a coach, I've certainly seen my share of very good leaders and my share of very bad leaders. And I thought it'd be great to share the wisdom from the very good leaders. Hence the Let's Talk Leadership podcast. You're going to hear from a variety of leaders who are in a variety of roles, sharing their leadership expertise by answering the same 6 questions. Every single leader is unique in their style and approach, and we want to capture that uniqueness and provide you, the listener, with a diverse way of looking at leadership. So let's get moving and talk to our next leadership guest. In this episode, I am thrilled to be speaking to Tom Principe, who is the founder and the CEO of SalesSXess. We're going to hear all about Tom's approach to leadership. So Tom, welcome, and thank you for being with us today.
Karen, thanks for hosting me. I'll tell you, this is a great program you're doing here because, as we all know, there is no one definition of leadership. So this is great.
And ain't that the truth, Tom? Indeed. So before we get going, and I'd like to say welcome, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about your background and a snapshot of SalesSXess. And then we'll get into our leadership conversation.
Sure. So as the CEO of SalesSXess, I work as an outsourced head of sales, and I bring hope to small business owners. And the way I do that is by helping them understand the best way to grow their sales revenue. And I do that by putting in place a good sales strategy, putting in place the right structure to help support that, putting in place specific processes, and then most importantly, making sure they have the right people in the right roles, because that I found to be the most critical thing. I reside in New Jersey. I have a family of 4 children, a wife and a dog. In my spare time, I love spending time with my family, but also travel and just getting out and about.
Yes. And we met through Provisors. And so you're in New Jersey, I'm in New York, and we've actually got to meet each other face to face in some of those meetings.
And we actually get along, New Jersey, New York. It's great.
Hey, I'm a Jersey girl. So that's
right.
why. That's why. So, Tom, I do have to say, as a small business owner, the fact that what you said right off the bat, you give us hope. And, there are days as an entrepreneur and as a small business owner, the hope waves a little bit and you think, oh, my goodness. And so to be able to instill that with a process, which we'll talk about in just a little bit, really is helpful. So I just love that. And the fact that you're from Jersey, I mean, how could we not be friends? Absolutely. So, Tom, thank you for all that. And I want to get into our first question. And what you said earlier was exactly right. You know what? There's no one way to define leadership. There just isn't. And I've done 35 episodes. I've spoken to 35 different leaders. And one thing I know for sure is there is no one definition. So with all that set up, Tom, do tell, what is your definition of leadership?
Karen, this is such a great question. I've really given it a lot of thought because, like you said, there's so many definitions of leadership, and we've all, heard different things from different people. So when I reflected on this, what I thought for me personally, a leader has the ability, I think, to leverage the strengths and competencies of others to instill confidence in getting the desired results. And so I think if you identify what the competencies and skills of others are, you trust in that, and you help them to kind of achieve the results that you want to get, that to me is the definition of being a good leader.
Yeah. And you didn't anywhere in that definition say anything about you. It was about the people. And that's the other thing you said in the beginning with your opening. What do you have to do? You have to make sure that you have the right people in the right seats. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so we as small business owners have to do that. Every organization has to do that. And as a leader, you have to do that.
Yes, agreed, 100%.
Yeah, love that. Love that. All right, great. So let's talk about value. So again, this question to me is really so important because it's the guiding light for how people make decisions. And when you make a decision that's easy, it's like, oh, no problem. However, when it's a complicated decision, if you can sit back and think about you from a values perspective, it helps the decision-making function, even though hard decision, but if, again, you're basing it on your values. So for me, I just feel like it's really important to understand values. So what are your top three? Give us your top three.
Yeah. So my top three values are listen, understand, and integrity. And so by listening, I mean be an active listener, not just hearing, but really listen and take the time. And then the second part of that is really understanding. You really have to understand, where that other person is coming from or where the team is coming from, kind of put yourself in their place. And then, of course, integrity, to me, it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Integrity is so important because if you can't lead with integrity, then I think you're, going to be spiraling out of control.
And spiraling out of control. And then why should anybody trust you, Tom? I mean, why would anybody follow you? I mean, if you start to think about what you indicated was your definition of leadership, and it was really about how do you leverage strengths and competencies and those kinds of things. Part of that whole institution is building trust. And if people don't trust that you're going to make the right decisions based on the need of the organization and the people, then why would anybody follow a leader? There's just no reason to do it.
Yeah, I think trust, like you said, is such an important critical factor. In fact, I would add to that. I would say it's trust and value, right? So obviously trust is important for the reasons you just mentioned, but I think people are always looking at the quote unquote leader as what's the value you bring to the table? What are you going to do for me? How are you going to help me, right? They don't really care about your history. They want to know moving forward. So that trust factor, but also what's the value that you bring in helping others?
Yes, exactly. And you're exactly right. I mean, when you think about the employees that we work with, I mean, both of us to this day, it is really about their future. It is really about their development. It really is about, am I going to be able to financially move my family forward, if you will? And, we live in New Jersey, New York. We both know cost of living's, Karen needs a new pair of shoes. But I like to say, Tom.
Yeah, it's out of control.
Out of control. Exactly. So the third question is, we've all had leaders, great leaders, crummy leaders in our world. But if you had to think about the best advice you ever got from a leader anywhere within your trajectory through your career, what do you think it would be?
Well, first of all, I got to say, when I reflect back on this, I've been really blessed that I've been around some really good leaders, and I'm smart enough to know what I don't know. And so, especially in my formative years, I wanted to listen, I wanted to learn, and then I can make my own judgments based on the style and what fits my style and so on and so forth. But I think, some of the things that I picked up along the way, one lesson was the lesson of threes, right? People can generally only remember three things at a time. So don't overwhelm them and stuff. Give them three priorities, three things that you really think are really, really critical and important. Another great thing I learned from somebody is just ask the question, what do you think? Because you'll get a lot better probably ideas than if you try and do it on your own, and just listen to people and kind of write those things down. Manage what you can control, I think, is another great philosophy that I learned. We focus so much on external things that we really don't have control over. So at the end of the day, you really need to boil it down in any situation. What do I have direct control over? Because that's really the only thing that you can impact. And then I just think the other key thing is setting the example, for what you expect, right? So I think, that cliche of lead by example, I think that's still very true.
And so that sounds like it's a combination from different leaders that you've had in your career, right?
Yes.
And you come out of sales is your most of your career in sales, Tom?
Yeah, again, I was very fortunate to grow up in companies where I had a lot of opportunities. So majority was sales, but I also have a fair amount of marketing experience. I led a training and development or learning and development department for a couple of years. I've done national accounts. So again, I've been very blessed that I've had a lot of opportunities along the way to expand out of sales, but it's made me a better sales person and a better sales leader by having those other experiences as well.
Yeah, because then functionally you understand how those work within an organization and how to pull them back in. Yes, exactly. Number 4. So obviously we're going through an enormous amount of transition and change. We've got a lot of layoffs, we've got the social awakening and the economic implications of both, the recession whispering and those types of things. So how do you lead through transition and change? And when I ask that question, it's because we all know that transition and change is just inevitable. There's no way that
Yeah.
we're not going to have that. So what do you do to either anticipate it, or what do you do once it has happened so that you can accept it and move forward?
Well, first of all, I don't talk politics these days.
Oh, smart
No,
man.
but I think, Karen, this goes back to what I said about the three values as a leader. I think this is where listening and understanding really plays a critical role versus judging. I think sometimes we're too quick to judge a situation, and that's where I think we need to really put our listening skills and truly understanding the situation and what the individual may be experiencing in relation to that change or that transition as well. And then I think it goes back to something I just said, which is focus on what you can control. Especially during times of change and transitions, you can't control for a lot of the external variables. Like your company's going to go do job cuts, right? You don't have a lot of control over that, right? And so that's the thing I think that's most important, is that focus on what you have control over, because those are the things I think that you can fix and that they reduce your anxiety level. Right. And then you just have to kind of have, and I know this is not easy, but you have to kind of think through that, okay, everything else is out of my control. So it's going to happen regardless. But I just need to focus on what I have control over. I used to tell people too that we're always, looking for promotions in companies, and then so many people look ahead to that next step or the next step after that. I always just tell them, the best advice is just focus on your current job and do the best you can possibly do at your current job. And you know what? You'll get opportunities that you never even thought of, because you're doing what you're supposed to do. And you're excelling in your current role. And that's something, again, you have control over that, right?
Yes. And you also have control, and that'll be the next question, but you also have control over what you do for a living, but also the learning that you want to have so that you can continue to kind of walk through the organization and get some promotions and maybe do something more visible and those types of things. So no question about it. But one thing that you said that just prompted me to think of something, Tom, is, if I go back to your values, listen, understand, integrity, and we go back to thinking about, manage what you can control, ask the question, what do you think? All of those items that you've mentioned is about EQ and not IQ. So you're smart, I'm smart. Lots of leaders are smart. Sometimes leaders are so smart they get in their own way. And, as you're talking, I'm thinking, this whole idea about leadership, and to me, EQ is as important as IQ. So EQ is, I'm self-aware of who I am. I'm self-aware of my audience. I'm listening. I'm showing empathy. I'm being collaborative. I have integrity. People trust me. To me, that just kind of continues to resonate as I start talking to other leaders. Because, you and I, Tom, have both been in presentations. We've both gone to conferences where, oh my goodness, I'm so excited. I'm going to listen to this person speak. So smart. And then, you walk out and you're like, what are they talking about? I have no idea.
Yeah, Karen, I would argue in some cases, EQ is even more important, I think, than IQ. In fact, there was an interesting study done in the Harvard Business Review many, many years ago, and it graphed out like CEOs. In this case, they were looking at analytical skills versus people skills. And it was interesting because it showed people skills became more and more important the higher up you got in an organization versus your analytical skills. And I think that's counterintuitive to what a lot of people think when you look at a CEO position. But to your point, EQ is so critically important.
Yeah. When I'm talking to folks, it's about the head and the heart, and you have to have a combo of both. And if you don't have a combo of both, it probably isn't going to work. Yes. And we could name people that we all know, but we wouldn't.
Right. Or you're going to totally, disrupt a lot of people along the way, which is not a good thing either. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. All right. So we know the best leaders are curious and always learning. We just talked about that. So what tools do you use? What resources might you use? Because, for me, if you don't keep learning, then why bother keep working? So what do you do to continue to grow and develop?
Yeah, exactly. So again, I'm going to go back to what I learned, the rule of threes, right? So there's really three things that I've relied on through my career. Number one, there's a great book called Lincoln on Leadership. It's a very short read, but it basically looks at Lincoln's presidency and looks at some of the leadership skills that he employed during arguably one of the toughest times in our country. And it just kind of looks at some of the behaviors that he did and how that can be applied into leadership and into companies and so on and so forth. And that I keep that on my iPhone, that book, because it's just such a great, resource and tool. And it keeps reminding me of the important things that a leader should be doing. The second thing is, as far as a formal kind of training, learning, I've always liked the concept of situational leadership. And the reason why I like that is because it focuses on the specific skill and the person's competency related to that skill. So the example I love to give is, you could have a salesperson, they could be the best salesperson in the world. Okay. So in sales situations, they probably don't need as much, hands-on coaching or directiveness, but they could also be a very, very poor administrative person, right? They don't get their paper. So in that case, it's a totally different style you have to apply, right? There, you do have to be more hands-on and more. And I've always liked that because to me, it's a very functional type of model to work in, because no one is 100% competent at every single, skill in their job. And I think this allows you to kind of tailor your approach to help them excel at areas they're already good at, but more importantly, to help them develop in areas where they may not be quite as good. And then the last part is what I mentioned earlier. It's just, I've tried to model the behavior of trusted leaders that I've had the good fortune to be exposed to. And sometimes I'll ask myself, what would so-and-so, do in that kind of situation, right? So just that modeling behavior.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And the rule of threes is obviously, we can only comprehend so much. So that makes sense. And the situational leadership, if I go back to that, part of the Keep It Real leadership program, we say every leader is unique. That's no different than if you're an individual performer, you're still a leader as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. And so everybody's going to have a different set of competency, a different set of skills, a different way of looking at the world. And if every leader treats every single person exactly the same, there's such a huge miss. Such a huge miss. Yeah.
Right. So lost opportunity there. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. However, the leader has to take time to pay attention to that, Tom. And, everybody's so busy these days. Everything runneth over, if you will, and people are stressed. And we need to take the time to step back and take a look and say, what does this person need from us?
And there again, Karen, just to circle back, that's where the listening and understanding comes in, taking the time to do those two things.
Yeah, absolutely. All righty. So the last, and of course, not least question is, what piece of art or music or literature or whatever else keeps you balanced and brings you joy, with joy being the operative word here. Now, we know you have 4 children and your wife and your dog, and you like to travel, but what fills that little heart of yours?
I love music. I play a little bit of guitar, not very well, but I love that. It allows kind of for an expression of just feeling an emotion, and so many good memories obviously come from music and songs, etc.
Wait, I have to ask, what kind of music before you go on?
I like pretty much all kinds of music. I might offend some of your listeners. The only music I really have a hard time with is country western. I can listen to crossover country western, but the rest of it kind of, loses me a little bit. But other than that, I like, rock, progressive, jazz, classical. Love and at any given time, I'll have one of those turned on in the house here, which is great. Depending upon, that's what's great about music too, because music can fit your mood, right?
Yes.
So depending on how you're feeling, that may dictate what I have on in terms of music. And then the third thing for me personally is exercise as well. That believe it or not, that gives me joy, because it's as much a mental activity as it is a physical activity. And the fact that, I try and do that every day if possible, that's the mental part, just telling myself I've got to do it and feeling good about doing it. So those are probably the 2 things that kind of keep me joyful.
Yes. And what happens is when you don't work out, mind tricks, right? All day you think, oh my goodness, I didn't get to do it. Well, I get to do it later. And then before you know it, you're so obsessed about the fact that you didn't do it and when are you going to have time to do it? Just do it and get it over. Set the clock 30 minutes earlier and just do it.
Yeah, and then you're right. Those nagging reminders, right? So my office is downstairs at our house, and we have an exercise room, and so I can't avoid it. Every day I walk past that exercise room, and if I look in there and I say, "Did I exercise today?" and if I say no, I kind of walk by very quickly and go upstairs. But if I say yes, I'm like, it's just a good feeling, right? Just mentally, you just feel good.
Oh yeah, and the other thing people ask me oftentimes, do you meditate? And I say my meditation is when I'm exercising, because
exactly.
somewhere else. I don't use iPods. I don't listen to music. I mean, nothing. And I'm just normally outside because let nature take over. And I come up with, I'm so smart when I'm trying not to think. So smart. It's amazing.
No, you know what, Karen? 100%. We're cut from the same cloth. I'm exactly the same way. I don't listen to music or anything. That's my thinking time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
to your point, I think things through when I'm out there exercising, which is great.
I know. It's wonderful. Yeah. I love that. All right. So Tom, thank you so much for your insight and your thoughts and all talking leadership. I could talk all day about leadership. And what's nice is it's so inspiring to hear, your way of leading. And, we're so grateful for, of course, all your wise words.
Well, thank you, Karen. Like I said at the outset, I think this is a really valuable program you do because, leadership is a tough job. And there's no, 100% correct way. So I think the more exposure you have, like I said, through my career, I was fortunate to get exposed to different people. So what you're doing is great because you're exposing people to all kinds of different leadership styles, and smart people will take away something from everybody. So that's great.
Yeah. And that's exactly right, because there is no one way to do it. So everyone, thanks for listening. I'm Karen Colligan, and you've been listening to Tom Principe, founder and CEO of SalesSXess. If this leadership podcast was of interest to you, go to our YouTube channel, People Think SF, and look at all the other distinguished leaders I've had the pleasure of interviewing. You'll learn so much about the uniqueness of leadership. I know I have. And don't forget to share with your colleagues. Till the next episode of the Let's Talk Leadership podcast, have a good one. And don't forget to keep it real. Music by Poddington Bear and editing by Mary Lee Williams. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk soon. Bye now.